So now we're at the point with our coworker or our family member, and it's time to share our story wrapped around the gospel. And we love to use stories from the Bible to kind of bridge into that. And so we're going to practice using the story that we just shared as a transition into our story. So I'm going to say that I just shared the story of Zacchaeus. So I love that story because it reminds me of my own story. Even though I grew up in a religious home, going to church on Sundays, there was something about the whole just going to church on Sunday that I wasn't really seeing who Jesus was, and I felt really confused because I was like, I'm going to church. I should have the answers. And as I got older and saw things breaking apart in my family and church not really answering any of that, it made me really angry, and I was kind of stuck in my anger and confusion. And then some friends of mine just offered to read the Bible with me. And it was the first time that I understood that God knew I was angry and he knew I was confused. But he didn't want me to stay that way. And that's why he sent Jesus. And Jesus lived a perfect life. He didn't have any of my anger or any of my confusion. But he willingly died because he knew that 3 days later he would raise from the dead, proving he was from God. And he had the right to say, Lindsay, I can take away your anger. I can take away your confusion. And so he said the only answer is, if you believe this about me, you've got to turn from what you're trying to do, turn from your going to church every Sunday and that being enough, and follow me and make me your king. And I did that. And since then, I've had this purpose and this joy that I really always thought was impossible that people were faking, but I actually have it now. I'm going to stop there. That's not the end of the tool, but we're going to stop there because what I want to do is teach you how to share your story wrapped around the gospel in a really concise, quick, reproducible way. This is just the gospel of salvation. Of course, there's more to it, but how are we going to communicate people what Jesus has done in our lives? So I want you to start off by writing a circle in the far corner of your paper just like this. And in that circle, write 2 words that you would use to describe your life without Christ. This could be before you became a Christian, or it could just be even times in your life where you feel like you fell and it was without Christ. So now I want you to practice sharing with a partner. And the most important thing to practice is really the lead-in into sharing this. So let's pretend we just shared the story of Zacchaeus and practice flowing into sharing these 2 words about your life before Christ. And then once you've shared these 2 words, I want you to stop there. We're going to pause there. So now you've shared just the very beginning part of your testimony. Now I want you to, next to that circle, write another circle. And in it, you're going to draw a down arrow. And that's to help you remember it represents Jesus coming down. And then a cross to remind you to say that Jesus died. And then an up arrow to remind you that Jesus didn't stay dead. He rose from the dead. And these are just the basics of helping you, or the bones of helping you put the meat onto your story. So let me model what you're now going to share. So I love to tell that story because it reminds me a bit of my own story. Even though I grew up going to a church, I honestly felt angry when it seemed like Sunday wasn't enough and I didn't have the answers I needed. And I stayed in this anger, and it really brought about a lot of confusion too about what is true. And I stayed in that and couldn't get out of it until some friends of mine offered to read the Bible with me. And then I learned that God loves us and he doesn't want us to stay in our anger and our confusion. And that's why he sent Jesus down to the earth. And Jesus lived a perfect life. He didn't have any of my anger or confusion. But he died willingly, knowing that 3 days later he would raised from the dead, proving he was from God, and that he had the right to say, Lindsay, I can take away your anger and I can take away your confusion. Okay, so in that order of the 2 words going through to the actual gospel of Jesus coming down, dying, and raising up, I want you to share your story. Now remember, we haven't moved on from that, and so we actually haven't even mentioned a lot of things that you're going to want to go into, but just stop there after you're done with this bubble. Let's go ahead and draw a turning arrow, and it's going to resemble us turning from whatever it was that we were trying to do. And then next to the turn arrow, draw a crown to remind you to say that I made Jesus my king. And this is to help you with language, because there's a million ways you could say this, but we're trying to help you to say it in an organized way that tells the truth. And so, starting from this bubble, then I learned that God loves me, and he didn't want me to stay in my anger and confusion. And that's why he sent Jesus. And Jesus came and he lived a perfect life. He didn't have any of my anger or my confusion. But he willingly died because he knew that 3 days later he would raise from the dead, proving he was from God, and that he had the right to say, Lindsay, I can take away your anger and I can take away your confusion. But Jesus says the way to do that is to turn from whatever you're doing already yourself, whether that's going to church every Sunday or whatever it is. Turn and make me your king. Follow me. Okay, so I've added in the turn part and the make my king part. And it's really all through Jesus's words. And so I'm telling my story by saying how to follow Jesus, really. So I want you to try to put that together now. Now we've said turn and make him our king. So let's draw one last circle here. And I want you to write 2 words that you would use to describe your life as you are following Jesus. So this is your life with Jesus. I always like to say purpose and joy, because those were definitely things missing from my life when I really wasn't following Jesus. And now we're not done. I want you to add a number 1 and a number 2 down here right under your linear drawing. And with number 1, I want you to write, where are you? And next to the 2, I want you to write, where do you want to be? And I'm going to explain why. So with the 2 words, you've already said, Jesus said, if you just turn and follow me, turn from what you were trying to do and make me your king instead, then I could have my anger, my confusion taken away. And I did that. And now I have this purpose in my life that I always wanted but couldn't find myself, and this joy that honestly I thought people faked all of their lives, but I actually have it. So I'm adding in those 2 words. But then here's the real clincher. I say, as I share my story, I notice that people really resonate with where I was before or where I am now. So I'm curious, where do you feel like you are? Do you feel like you're near to God, or do you feel like you're far from him where I was? And the real question for them is, where do you want to be? So no matter how they answer, the question is, where do you want to be? And you need to let them know that they can do that right now. But before we get there, I want you to put it all together, starting as if you had just shared the story of Zacchaeus, going all the way through, working through your story in this way. And don't forget to ask them, where are you and where do you want to be? Go for it.
I've added a few of the transitions, which are really helpful. And you can see right after you use your 2 words to describe your life before Jesus, you can say something like, and I learned that, or I remembered something that I learned all growing up. And that's your transition to talk about Jesus coming down, dying on a cross, and raising again. And then you can see after that saying something like, and he says, if we turn from living our way. So adding in that transition is also helpful. And then the 3rd transition is, after you said, make him your king, we say, and I did that, and now I have peace and joy, or purpose, whatever your words are to describe life after Jesus. So put it all together, and here is where we will lead our partners to faith. And so let them say their prayer in their own words, and you can use this as your helpful guide of saying, do you believe this about Jesus? Well, tell him this, that you want to make him king of your life. So give it a shot, leading each other to faith. This will be really helpful.
For how, if someone wants to follow Jesus, what do I need to ask them or tell them? Really, you're just asking them if they believe this bubble and if they're willing to do these 2 things, because therefore they can have that, right? So really, this is to help you realize if someone's ready to be with Jesus, they can do that right now, and you can lead them through it by asking these questions and then letting them say to Jesus what's in their heart.
All the right things to do and say in a religious home, but it felt empty and dissatisfying. And I knew I was depressed and struggling with darkness on the inside. And I tried to find satisfaction and help in all kinds of things, like alcohol, relationships, partying, even good things, helping other people. or being successful, but none of those things really satisfied me deeply. And it was just a spiral of darkness. But I was reminded of some really good truth that I heard all along, that God loves us so much, sent his son, Jesus, to come live a perfect life here on earth, died on a cross, rose again to prove he had power over my darkness and even death. And he said if we turn from living our way and make him king of our life, that we can be close to God. And a few years back I did that, and I had this peace come over me and this purpose. And I'm not perfect, but I know that I'm with God now. And I love telling other people. And I find as I do, there's kind of two types of people, two camps that people fall in. Those who are far from God, or those who are near through Jesus. And Lindsay, where would you say that you are today? I'm curious.
That's a good question. Yeah, I've always known there's a God, and I've like heard about Christianity before, or I've heard about Jesus, obviously, but I would definitely not say I'm close to God, but I wouldn't say I like don't believe in it. So maybe like in the middle.
Yeah, no, thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
Where would you want to be?
I mean, I would love to have a faith like yours. Yeah, I would love to say that I feel like I'm close to God for sure. But
that bit about Jesus, do you believe that about him? That he died and rose again, and God did that?
Yeah, I don't think that I have any problem believing that, like, that part that you said that, like, God sent him and stuff. Like, I don't... Yeah, I feel like that's not hard for me to believe. Yeah.
Would you be willing, in your own words, just to tell Jesus that you want him to be the king of your life, like the boss, so that you can be close to God? Is that something you'd be willing to do today?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I've like felt that way before, but I've never like told him.
You can totally do that now, and I can be here just to support you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like out loud?
Yeah, just tell him, he'll hear you.
I've never prayed out loud before.
You got this, there's no pressure.
Okay, do I have to say anything?
Just however you want to describe on your heart what you're believing now, and that you want him to be the king of your life.
Okay, this is crazy. Okay.
Yeah, you got it.
Jesus, I believe that you are who Colin says you are, and I want to be close to God, and I know my heart is like ready for that, and I've done a lot of different things, but I'm ready to follow you, so help me, please.
Man, Lindsay, that's so amazing. Like, that's so